We all think we know Pride and Prejudice, right? I mean, it's one of the greatest love stories ever told. But what if we've been missing the real story all along? Today, we're going to look at it through a totally different lens, one that says the romance is actually the result of something way deeper and a whole lot harder. So, let's just ask the big question right up front. What if the heart of this book isn't really about Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy falling for each other? What if Jane Austen was up to something much bigger, something about the very nature of truth and how we think we know things? The idea here is that the novel is basically a giant, brilliant experiment. It's an investigation into why we get things so spectacularly wrong about the world and about other people. And more importantly, what it actually takes to finally see things clearly. So yeah, let's dive into how Jane Austen runs this very human experiment. At its core, the argument is that this story is all about knowing. It's what you might call an epistemological novel, which, is just a fancy way of saying it's a book about how we know what we know and how we deal with that gut punch of a moment when we realize our judgment is totally, completely flawed. And that brings us to the single most important idea for this whole breakdown, epistemic humility. It sounds complicated, but it's really not. It's just the intellectual honesty to admit that you don't see the whole picture, that your judgment can be way off. And honestly, the entire journey for Elizabeth and Darcy is just one long, hard struggle to get to this one idea. The novel's title is the biggest clue. It's not just describing a couple of personality quirks. It's describing the two massive roadblocks to real knowledge. The entire plot kicks off because of these epic first impression fails, where both Elizabeth and Darcy are 100% certain and 100% wrong. And this slide just breaks down their mistakes so perfectly. On one side, you've got Darcy's pride. This is a kind of intellectual arrogance, right? He sees the embarrassing members of the Bennet family and makes a huge generalization, basically writing off everyone connected to them. Then you've got Elizabeth's prejudice. This is a failure of scrutiny. She's so offended by Darcy and so taken in by Wickham's sob story that she just accepts it without a shred of real evidence. It just felt right, so she ran with it. So, how do you fix a problem like that? How do you break through someone's deeply held but totally wrong beliefs? Well, Jane Austen's answer is a shock to the system. The turning point of this entire book isn't some grand romantic moment. Nope, it's a piece of paper. See, Darcy's letter is the moment that cold, hard reality just smashes into Elizabeth's personal worldview. It's the first time in the entire story she gets pure, verifiable information. No gossip, no social spin, no personal bias. It's like a software update for her brain, a massive data correction for a model of the world that was totally buggy. And this is the result. This quote is her big confession. It's the moment she admits her own thinking was the problem. She realizes her pride in being a good judge of character, her vanity, is what blinded her. She wasn't just wrong about Darcy, she was wrong about her own ability to be right. It's a devastating moment. And this gets to a really crucial idea, something the source material calls the pedagogy of error. The point is that real, deep learning isn't gentle. It almost always requires the painful, humbling, frankly humiliating experience of being proven completely wrong. This slide just lays out that whole painful process. Both of our main characters start at step 1, arrogant certainty. I know what's what. Then comes step 2, painful humiliation. For Darcy, it's Elizabeth's brutal rejection of his proposal. For Elizabeth, it's reading that letter. That forces them both into step 3, this agonizing period of intellectual revision where they have to rethink everything. And only after all that pain can they finally get to step 4, a genuine, hard-won humility. What's so great is you can see this dynamic playing out with pretty much every character. You've got Elizabeth and Darcy at the top. They learn humility, and the result is growth and a real connection. Then you've got someone like Lady Catherine de Bourgh. She is stuck permanently in arrogant certainty. And the result is just stagnation. She never learns, she never grows. And then at the bottom, you have the Gardners, who are kind of the role models. They're wise, they're cautious. They have that epistemic humility from the start, and it gives them clarity. Okay, so what does all of this intellectual stuff have to do with the famous love story? Well, everything. The whole point Austen is making is that this intellectual journey isn't just happening alongside the romance,
It's the absolute foundation for it. You can't have a real, lasting connection with another person until you've first gotten intellectually honest with yourself. And Austen is super clear about where you find this truth and where you don't. She breaks it down into these two spheres. On the left, you have the public sphere. The balls, the gossip. Think of it like the messy, noisy social media feed of its day. It's a hotbed of misinformation. Real truth can only be found on the right, in the private sphere, in the verifiable facts of Darcy's letter, in the quiet reality of his home at Pemberley, and finally, in a truly honest conversation. Which brings us to this really powerful conclusion. Their marriage isn't just two people who fall in love. It's what you could call an epistemological contract. It's a mutual promise to always pursue the truth, to be willing to self-correct, and to never forget the limits of their own understanding. That's a partnership. So let's just recap the big takeaways here. First, Pride and Prejudice aren't just character flaws. They are failures of knowing. Second, true learning, real growth, often requires the pain of realizing you had it all wrong. Third, that humility isn't just some nice intellectual virtue. It is the absolute prerequisite for any real human connection. And finally, real truth isn't found out there in the noise. It's found through tough, rigorous self-assessment.
And that kind of leaves us with one last thought, a question that brings this 200-year-old lesson right into our own lives. Because if Jane Austen is right, the most important things we'll ever learn often start with that incredibly difficult moment of admitting we were wrong. So when was the last time that happened to you?